Hey. Welcome to another weekly Taxes and Retirement Live. I am your host, Andy Panko, owner of, where is it? There is it, Tenon Financial. Thank you for joining me. I am flying solo today. It is just me. It's not a special guest episode. Let me get rid of this for you. Tonight's topic will be Roth IRA withdrawal rules. Let me start, as always, with some dad jokes. And I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to wait until the end to take questions. As you'll see in the group, I changed up the schedule going forward to do a once a month free for all mailbag where you can just pepper me with questions on the spot. We'll see how that goes. I'm curious to see. I think it should be good. It should be fun if nothing else. But last few weeks it's been hard there's so many people joining, asking great questions. I used to just take the questions in line as I'm doing my spiel here, but the questions became overwhelming. So I'm going to now just kind of run through my bit, save the questions till the end, and then, get through what I can at the time. The mailbags will be different when we do that. It'll just be, here I am, go, bring on the questions. So anyway, for tonight, if you do have questions, post them now, post them later. I will, get to as many as I could at the end. All right, let us do the dad jokes for the week. Starting with, a police officer caught two kids playing with a firework and a car battery. He charged one and let the other one off. So anyway, yeah, the battery was charged. The firework was let off, in case you weren't sure about that. To whoever stole my copy of Microsoft Office, I will find you. You have my word. The guy excels at stealing. No way to work in PowerPoint there, I guess. And finally, wife says, which friends have you invited over for dinner lately? Husband says, my taste buds, as in my friends who like to eat. All right. That one was bad. Wow. I should have picked another one. Let me hit you with the disclaimer quick. This video is only general explanations and education. It is not specific tax, legal, or investment advice. Before considering acting on anything you see in this video, first consult with your tax, legal, or investment advisor, of which I am not. I am just some random bloke here on Facebook talking about stuff, hoping to educate and inform, but this is not specific advice to you or any of your particular situations. Thank you. So Roth IRA withdrawal rules. Now, tonight's conversation will be mainly directed at Roth IRAs. A lot of these provisions apply just the same to Roth 401ks or Roth 403bs. Where relevant, I'll work in the specific differences, if any, for those other employer plans. But otherwise, tonight's conversation is all about Roth IRAs. Fun fact, Roth was named after Senator William Roth. He was a senator from Delaware for about 30 years until about 2000. University of Delaware is my alma mater. That is one of those things, that the plaque up there in the blue frame, that's my University of Delaware degree, for those of you that care. The other ones are for, I don't even know about coin collecting and making paper airplanes. Those are fake up there. Just kidding. So let me bring up my presentation about Roth IRA withdrawal rules. Now, it's going to get technical. There's no way around it. I tried to condense it all into something as easy to understand and palatable and digestible as possible. But even then, this is still a pretty thick topic and technical topic with lots of ifs, thens, and things like that. Okay, let me get my screen share here. All right, share. Here we go. So let me start with this. This is important to understand with a Roth. So the money you put in is your contribution. Let's assume you put in $5,000. Over time, it grows by $1,000. It's a 20% gain on your original contribution, and based on whatever you invested in, it went up 20%. So now your total account is $6,000. It's important to keep a distinction between the monies that you contributed, in this case $5,000, versus the money that's gains thereon. That matters. It matters very much when doing Roth distributions and whether or not you have to pay taxes or penalties on some of it. I'm not talking about conversions yet. Conversions are yet another different, fun twist to this whole equation, and we'll discuss that. But for now, I'm just talking about a simple: you put money in, It grows, so your total account value is now $6,000. So keep that in mind. Sorry, I had a little cough. All right, so the other thing to keep in mind is that when you take money out of a Roth IRA, the IRS has certain ordering rules. Your money comes out in 4 stages. Any dollars you take out are first assumed to come out of money which you contributed, going back to our other example. So if you have a Roth with $6,000 in it, 5 of which are contributions, 1 of which is gains on the contributions, any money you take out, or I should say, the first $5,000 you take out will all be deemed to be a return of your initial contribution. So that's part 1 in these ordering rules, contributions. Then, if and when you take out enough that you've depleted all of the money that you contributed, cumulatively contributed over the years, not just any given year, but if you have a Roth that's 20 years old and you contributed $5,000 a year, not that you could have 20 years ago, but whatever, that's $100,000 of contributions. The first $100,000 you take out of that Roth will all be a return of your initial contributions. If and when you deplete your contributions, then any dollars you take out are assumed to come from money that you converted in from a pre-tax, tax-deferred account like a traditional IRA. Specifically, it is conversions that were taxed upon the conversion. Hold that thought. The third order of monies that come out are conversions that were not taxed upon the conversion. Hold on. How could there not be tax upon conversion? Because we talk about in this group all the time doing conversions and having to pay tax on it. In most cases, yes. Here's the difference. If you have a traditional IRA that's just all pre-tax money, meaning every dollar in there is either a contribution on which you took a tax deduction, so you never pay tax, or gains on that money, which have also not yet been taxed, that's all pre-tax money. So anything you convert from that IRA to a Roth will be taxable at the time because you never pay tax on any of it. So you pay tax upon the conversion. That would be this bullet 2 here in these ordering rules. Different situation, something called like a backdoor Roth IRA contribution that we've also talked about and done videos about. Let's assume you open up an IRA that has nothing in it. It's a fresh IRA. You make a non-deductible contribution, meaning the money you put into it, you are not deducting in your tax return. So you're not saving any tax up front. In other words, the money you put into that IRA has already been taxed. If you then immediately turn around and take that money in your IRA and convert it to your Roth IRA, you will not have to pay tax upon that conversion because that money was already taxed when it first went into the traditional IRA. Still with me? I said taxed and convert and flip, and I said a lot of things. But point is, that's a non-taxable conversion because the money you're converting has already been taxed. You won't get double taxed on it. So that's this bullet 3. Again, there's 2 types of conversions: conversions that were taxed and conversions that were not taxed, upon the conversion. Keep it simple. Let's assume you've never done any conversions. So your Roth IRA is only number 1, contributions, and then number 4, earnings. Going back to our example, if you put in 5,000, it grew by 1,000. You now have 6,000 in your Roth. You have number 1 is conversion. So the first 5,000 you take out will all be, first 5,000 you take out will all be contributions, bullet 1. The other 1,000 you take out, if and when you take it out, will be earnings, bullet 4. Make sense? So this stuff's important to know as we progress through the through the rest of this bit here. All right. I know I said no comment. I'm not taking questions. I'm just putting up some comments I happen to see here on the side of my screen. Should have worn a Van Halen shirt since we're talking about Roth. Yeah, I do not have one. I don't know if this is good or bad, but I like Van Hagar better than I liked Van Halen. David Lee Roth, definitely a colorful character, but Sammy Hagar put his voice to shame, if you ask me. Probably just made some enemies there. Okay. And fellow Blue Hen. Yes. So University of Delaware is their mascot, the Blue Hens. That is where I graduated, University of Delaware. So yes, I'm in Blue Hen. All right, moving on. So that's the ordering rules, important to know. Now, this is a technical slide, but this is super important. I have another slide that'll help clear this up after this, but I just wanted to lay this out as the IRS breaks it down. Specifically, Roth withdrawals and the rules around it are mentioned in IRS publication 590-B as in boy. Now, these IRS publications are wordy and big, but they're really good, really well written, actually. Not too they're as technical as they need to be, but no more technical, thankfully. They are written for for the average taxpayer to understand, thankfully. So if you ever have questions about tax stuff, go to the source. The IRS has a lot of great information on their website, and they have these things called publications. There's one publication per each topic, if you will. So the one about IRA or Roth IRA distributions is 590-B as in boy. And the one about contributions is 590-A as in apple. All right, but this one's all about the B. This is the distributions. So the big thing to know with Roth IRAs, you've probably heard of the 5-year rule. There's actually 2 different ones. We're talking about the main one, the overarching one first. We're not talking about the one that applies to conversions. We're talking about the general 5-year rule for Roth IRAs. So in order for distributions to be quote unquote qualified distributions, which means there's no tax or penalty at all on any of your withdrawals, 2 things need to happen. Number 1, you need to meet a 5-year holding period. The clock starts January 1st of the year you open and fund your first Roth IRA. You can't just open it. I've seen people say that. People believe that to be true, but it's not the case. You can't simply open a Roth IRA, put nothing in it, and have that start your clock. Doesn't count. Publication 590-B specifically says open. I forget the wording, but open. They don't say funded, but the point is they make it clear you have to open it and put something in it for the clock to start. So again, January 1st of the year you first, when you open and fund your first Roth IRA is when this 5-year clock starts. Whether you do it January 1st or December 31st of a given year, the clock starts January 1st of that year. Now, common question. Let's say you opened a Roth IRA at Vanguard 15 years ago. You just opened another one last year at Fidelity or Schwab or TD. Doesn't matter. Question is commonly, well, this new one I just opened, does it reset the clock for either or both or, this one IRA? No. Doesn't matter how many Roth IRAs you have. It's only the first one you opened and funded that this clock is based off of. Once you meet that clock for one Roth IRA, you've met it for all of them, even ones you haven't yet opened, right? So if I already met the 5-year clock from a Roth I opened 10 years ago, I can open a new Roth IRA tomorrow. Its 5-year clock is already met for purposes of this test. So that's important. That's the one. That's the bigger overarching 5-year rule. One of 2 5-year rules to know about. The other one's specific to conversions. Again, I'll get there. So you have to meet that 5-year rule in order for distributions to be quote unquote qualified. And then the other thing that needs to happen is one of these additional points in any one. Most commonly, the one that happens is you hit 59.5. So the day you reach 50, it's not the year you're 59.5, it's when you actually turn 59.5. You've met this. Any one of these 4 will meet this second condition. So again, typically it's you hit 59.5 and boom, you met this second test. Even if you're not 59.5, there's a few other things that would qualify to satisfy the second condition. One is basically you die. It doesn't help you very much, but whoever inherits your account, it automatically, this second prong, I just lost my mouse. So this is the first prong. You need to meet both prongs. The first one is first account, at least 5 years old, starting with January 1st of the year you opened and funded it. The second prong you have to meet is this. Again, so let's say you die before 59.5. Well, the second bullet covers you. Specifically, it covers your beneficiaries. It now meets the second prong. The other one is if the money you're taking out is to build, acquire, or rebuild your first home, and it's only $10,000, and your lifetime qualifies for this. So you can't take out $100,000 and claim all $100,000 was qualified because you took it to build a house. Only $10,000 in your lifetime counts. And if you're married, it's $10,000 per spouse. And finally, the other condition that would satisfy the second prong is you're totally disabled. Now, the IRS has a specific definition of what totally disabled means. The quote's here: you're unable to engage in any substantial, gainful activity by reason of any medically determinable physical or mental impairment, which can be expected to result in death or to be of long continued and indefinite duration. So it's not just, you fell and broke your wrist skateboarding or something, or playing pickleball. Pickleball is all the rage with pre-retirees and retirees these days. So, you basically have to be in a position where you flat out, you can't work ever again, in essence. So if you meet, again, your first account's at least 5 years old, and you meet one of these four, you're done. You're set. All distributions from your Roth IRAs from that point forward will be quote unquote qualified, which means there are neither taxes nor penalties on any money that comes out, period. Doesn't matter what that money is, whether at this point, whether it was contribution, whether it was gain, whether it's conversion, doesn't matter. Once you meet both of these prongs, all distributions from there on out are qualified, period. All right, let that soak in. And to help that soak in, here is a nice little, I don't know if you can see this. If you're looking on a phone or something, this is going to be way too small. I apologize, but on my screen here, it looks large enough and sensible. Here is straight from IRS publication 590B, as in biscuit. Here's a quick, neat little flow chart to help you determine if your Roth IRA distributions are quote unquote qualified. I highlighted in yellow the two that will most likely come into play for most people. So the very first one is, has it been at least 5 years from the beginning of the year for which you first set up and contributed to your Roth IRA? That's that 5-year rule I mentioned. So let's assume that's yes. Follow the arrow down. Next, were you at least 59 and a half years old at the time of the distribution? Again, for retirees, typically that'll be yes, in your 60s at some point. Now, what if it wasn't? So again, I highlighted those two because that's typically what most people do. Once you hit those two, that's the golden ticket. You're done. Again, every distribution from all of your Roth IRAs from that point forward are tax and penalty free. But what if it's not? What if you're not 59 and a half? I won't belabor the point, but it just goes through those other conditions, the other parts of that second prong I just mentioned before. And then finally, it'll tell you at the bottom, either yes, it is a qualified withdrawal at the very bottom, or no, it's not. I'm sorry, qualified distribution, or no, it's not, if you look off on the right there, in which case it may be subject to tax or penalty. All right, so now, I can't even read it. That's how small it is. The distribution from the Roth IRA is not a qualified distribution. The portion of the distribution allocable to earnings may be subject to tax, and it may be subject to the 10% additional tax. This is the box I'm reading here. So where I'm going with this is, what happens if the money you're taking out is not a qualified distribution because you haven't met both those prongs? Again, the first prong is at least 5 years since you opened your first account and funded. The second prong is one of those other four conditions. If you take money out without meeting all those conditions, it is not a qualified distribution. This box here at the bottom tells you you may be subject to tax and penalty on your the earnings. And this is why it matters. Again, like I said before, you contributed $5,000 in our example. It grew by $1,000, so you now have $6,000 in your Roth IRA. Well, money you contribute, you can take out anytime with no tax or penalty, regardless of your age, regardless of the reason, regardless how old your account is, etc. So let's play that back. Let's assume I opened my first Roth IRA today. I'm only 43. I'm not 59 and a half. I opened my Roth IRA today. I put in $5,000. Tomorrow, I can take out that $5,000 tax and penalty free, because that was my money that's money that was already taxed when I put it in, and you don't get double taxed on that. So that $5,000 can come out tax and penalty free anytime, any reason, period. It's the growth, it's the earnings, as this box says, where you need to watch out. If you take out distributions of earnings and it's not a qualified distribution, there will be tax, and there will be a 10% early withdrawal penalty in some cases. If you're under 59, well, not in some cases, if you're under 59 and a half, you'll have that penalty. Possibly. There's even exceptions to the exceptions, which I'll get to. So anyway, that's why I just wanted to make it clear that it's important to distinguish between money you put in, i.e. contributions, versus growth/gain/earnings, whatever you want to call it, because you can always take out your contributions anytime, no tax penalty, no reason required. It's the earnings that need to be a qualified distribution in order to avoid tax and penalty on it. Cool? Or cool enough? All right, one second. Okay. Next. So those are contributions and gains. Relatively straightforward so far, at least compared to what we're about to talk about. Now let's talk about conversions. Where'd it go? Where's my slides? There it is. Conversions. Dun, dun, dun. All right. So recall I said before that there's two five-year rules when it comes to Roth IRAs. One is the overarching 5-year rule I just discussed, where your first Roth IRA needs to have been open and funded at least 5 full years in order for your withdrawal to potentially be qualified. That always applies regardless. The second 5-year rule is unrelated to, for the most part, unrelated to the other one, and is specific to doing conversions. Again, a conversion is when you take money that you have in a non-Roth account, a tax-deferred non-Roth account, such as a traditional IRA or SEP IRA, SEP IRA, and convert, move that money into a Roth. Now, some people call it rollover, transfer, whatever. In the pure English sense of the word, yeah, those are all right. But the technical IRS speak is that when you move money from a tax deferred account to a Roth account, it's a conversion. Okay. Here's the 5-year clock for conversions. Now this gets tricky, and I have some resources to help make sense of this that I'll share with you. But just try to stick with me here. When you do a conversion, and you're under 59 and a half. I think a cleaner way to present this. Maybe I should stick to the slide for now and go with that. So withdrawals of amounts that were converted that were taxed upon the conversion. Remember I said there's conversions that are taxed when you do the conversion, and there's conversions that are not, because that money was already taxed before you converted it. So specifically just for conversions where there was tax due, in the year of the conversion, you may have a 10% penalty if you take out the amount converted within 5 years. And here's where I'm going with this. So you'll be subject to that 10% penalty on taking out the conversion amount, unless one of these two things applies. It's been more than 5 full years since the conversion was done. The clock on that starts in January 1st of the year of the conversion, and each conversion has its own 5-year clock. Now, every conversion done in a given year all have the same clock because it's the same calendar year. But if you do a conversion this year, for example, in what's today, February 2021, the 5-year clock on that conversion starts January 1st, 2021. And let's assume I do another conversion in March. That clock also starts January 1st, 2021. So all conversions done in 2021, their 5-year clock starts January 1st of this year. Fast forward 2022. Any conversions you do in 2022, their 5-year clock starts January 1st, 2022. Okay. So if you do a taxable conversion, again, a conversion where tax was owed upon the conversion, or taxes owed in the year of the conversion, I should say, you have to wait 5 full years, starting with January 1st of the year the conversion was done, until you can take the converted monies out without 10% penalty. This 5-year per conversion rule goes away if you look at the second bullet, if you're at least 59 and a half. So what does this mean? This is confusing. I know again, I tried to make this as streamlined as possible, but it's clunky. There's no way around it. So let's do an example. So you are 52. You convert $10,000 from your traditional tax deferred IRA. None of that money's been taxed before. It's all pre-tax. So you convert $10,000 to your Roth IRA in the year you're 52. Okay. In order to take out that $10,000, you would have to wait 5 full years, starting with January 1st of the year you did the conversion. Only after then, can you take out that $10,000 amount you converted without having to pay any 10% penalty. And you won't have to pay tax on it because you already paid tax when you did the conversion. So you won't be taxed again, but you may be penalized with this 10% early withdrawal if you don't wait at least the 5 years before you withdraw that money out. That 5-year clock goes away once you hit 59 and a half. So let's tweak that example. You are 57 and you do a $10,000 taxable conversion from your traditional IRA to your Roth IRA, right? Your 5-year clock starts January 1st of that year, but guess what? Once you hit 59 and a half, even though you're only 2-3 years into your clock, doesn't matter. The 5-year clock is over, rip it up, throw it out, you're done. You don't have to worry about it because you hit 59 and a half. From that point forward, you can take out the amount you converted at any time with no tax because you already paid tax and no penalty because you're 59 and a half. To further confuse things, notice I said you can take out the amount of the conversion without tax because you already paid tax and without penalty because you're 59 and a half. Any earnings you've since made on that conversion may still be taxable. Now you have to look to the other 5-year rule, that overarching rule that your Roth IRA needs to be at least 5.5 years old. Your first one needs to be at least five full calendar years old, starting with January 1st of the year you first contributed. Only then can you take out earnings of any ilk, whether it's earnings on conversions or earnings on contributions. Only then can you take out earnings without tax and or penalty after meeting that 5-year rule. All right, dropped a lot on you there. I'm sure you all have questions about this, so I will get to them because conversions are tricky. Now, for what it's worth, you may be wondering, if I do a conversion from a traditional IRA to a Roth and I pay the tax on it, why am I subsequently penalized if I take that converted amount out before 5 years are up or before I'm 59 and a half? Well, the reason is because think about it this way. If you had left that money in your traditional IRA, all IRAs have a 10% early withdrawal penalty on any money you take out prior to age 59 and a half. There's some exceptions to it, but let's just assume exceptions don't apply in your case. So if you are 52, you can't take money out of your IRA, period, without paying tax and a 10% early withdrawal penalty. Again, there's exceptions, but we'll throw those out. Just, normal, you take money out for the fun of it, you will be taxed and penalized. That's if you're 52, let's assume. Once you hit 59 and a half, in the regular IRA, that 10% penalty goes away. You'll still have to pay tax, but 59 and a half, boom, 10% gone at that point forward for the rest of your life. That's the genesis of why conversions carry over a restriction on your ability to get money out without the 10% penalty. Because let me go back to that example. Let's assume you're 52. You have money in an IRA. You want to get your greasy hands on it, but you don't want to pay tax. Well, you may have to pay tax, but you want to get around the penalty. If you were allowed to do a conversion, you pay tax. If you were allowed to then take that money out the next day without penalty, well, guess what? You just circumvented the penalty you'd otherwise have if you were to have taken that money out of your traditional IRA. So the IRS doesn't want you skirting around that by just converting it, paying tax, which you can't avoid. But if you convert it, you pay tax. They don't want you to be able to just walk away from that 10% penalty. So they make you stick it out for 5 years until you can avoid that 10% penalty, or until you hit 59 and a half when the penalty would have gone away anyway. So that's why that there's this 5-year clock on taxable conversions, because the IRS doesn't want you gaming them with getting out of having to pay the 10% early withdrawal penalty. All right, I'll leave that there. That's a little more technical, but anyway, that's the reason why there's this 5-year rule on taxable Roth conversions. All right, next. So let's now assume forget conversions for now because those just complicate things. Let's go back to the example where you have just $5,000 of contributions and $1,000 of gains. So you have a $6,000 Roth IRA account. Now, one of the big benefit or the big benefits of Roth is that if used properly and all the withdrawals are quote unquote qualified, all of the gains are not taxed along the way. And then when you take the money out, it's all tax free. So Roth, you pay tax up front, you put money in, but in theory, if you don't, hit yourself with any penalties or whatever, all money eventually grows tax free, comes out tax free. Now, what if for whatever reason you need to take money out prematurely? So the account's not 5 years old and you're not yet 59 and a half, or one of the two. You need the money. There's some exceptions to the 10% penalty. Now, you'd still owe tax on the earnings. Again, not contributions. You can always take out the amount of your contributions anytime, tax and penalty free, no reason required, no wait period, no whatever. This is just earnings we're talking about now. If you need to access your earnings prior to being 59 and a half or the account being 5.5 years old, meaning it's not yet qualified, there's about, what is this, 10 or 12? There's about 10 exceptions to the 10% early withdrawal penalty. One, so you're at least 59 and a half. Now, this is probably confusing. Like, wait, you just said, what if you're not? But what I mean by this is, so you're 59 and a half, but your account is not yet 5 years old. So you're 59, for example, you just opened your first Roth, you put money in, 6 months later, you turn 59 and a half. You may think, great, I'm good. Well, no, not yet, because your account is not yet 5 years old. Your first account is not yet 5 years old. So any earnings you take out won't have the 10% penalty because you're 59 and a half, but they will still be taxed until your account's 5 years old. Okay. So this is one way you can get around the 10% penalty, but you still have to pay tax on earnings in this case. Next, again, similarly, you die. In the hands of your heirs, the 10% penalty is waived when they take the money out. Here's an interesting one. So people always think that when you have a Roth IRA and you die, all of that money is automatically tax-free to your heirs. Not entirely true. Your contributions you put in will be tax and penalty free to your heirs. There'll be no so it's just the earnings we're talking about now, let's say. If and when your heirs take out the earnings you had in your account, they won't have the 10% penalty because this waiver applies, but they may owe tax on those earnings if your account is not yet 5 years old. Again, that 5-year rule. Now, the time you had the account while you're alive still counts. So let's assume you open the account, 2 years later you die, your beneficiaries take over the account. The 2-year progress you had towards that 5-year window will port over to your heirs. Your heirs now only have to wait 3 years until they can take earnings out of your account tax-free. Again, the amounts you contributed will always come out tax and penalty free, whether your hands or your heirs' hands. It's just the earnings we're talking about here. Super confusing, I know. Such are the rules around this. All right. The other case where the 10% penalty is waived, but you'd still owe tax on earnings is the distribution is used to build, acquire, or rebuild your first home. Again, totally disabled. Again, if the distribution is part of a series of substantially equal periodic payments, otherwise known as SEPP or Rule 72T, long story short, this is where you're younger than 59 and a half. You need money from your qualified accounts. The IRS will let you take it out. You set up this formal payment plan where you have to take these payments until you're 59 and a half and some other provisions. But anyway, this is one way around the 10% penalty as well. Or if you have to pay medical insurance premiums, but only during periods of your unemployment. So you can't just like voluntarily quit your job and use your Roth money penalty free to pay medical premiums. It needs to be during unemployment. If you're paying unreimbursed medical expenses in excess of 7.5% of your AGI, if you are paying qualified higher educational expenses, so tuition expenses for you or one of your dependents, if you have an IRS levy, they slapped you for taxes you didn't pay, and you have no other source of funds other than you have to tap your Roth IRA, you can take out earnings without penalty, but you'll still have to pay tax to go pay back Uncle Sam. And finally, if you're in the military reserves, there's something called a qualified reservist distribution. where that would qualify to waive the 10% penalty on premature removal of earnings from your Roth IRA. It's a mouthful. What's next? Oh, that's it. Look at that. Okay. 1 second here. All right. So one other thing I want to share with you all is I do have let me find it, a summary sheet that I will share in the group. Hold on. I will pull it up here. It's a different screen. Here we go. Let me just minimize this so I can see what I'm looking at. All right. This is, can you see this? Yes, there we go. Okay, cool. Now, I tried to make this as concise and eloquent as possible, but there's just way too many conditions and conditions to conditions to make it any simpler than this. I tried my hardest to clean it up as much as possible, but this was the best I can come up with. Anyway, so I will share this in the group, but this just shows, again, the concept of ordering always matters. So look, here's the 4 orders. All monies you take out are first coming from your contributions, then conversions which were taxable, then conversions which were not taxable, and finally earnings. This just shows, is there a tax on it? Is there a penalty on it? Yes or no? For a qualified distribution, again, that's your first Roth IRA is at least 5 years old, and you are 59 and a half or older. Typically, there's a few other conditions, but most people meet it by 59 and a half. Any money you take out is tax and penalty free, period. Look at this. Doesn't matter if it's contribution, conversion, or earnings. Everything that comes out, tax free, penalty free, big fat period. Okay. So that's if it's a qualified distribution. And here's just summarizing what it takes to be a qualified distribution. And this is like people, again, often ask, I've had a Roth for 6 years. I'm 60 years old. I just do my first conversion today. Super exciting. Never did one. Just did it today. How long do I have to wait to take the money out? Do I have to wait 5 years? I heard there's a 5-year rule on conversions. Well, yes, there is a 5-year rule on conversions, but it does not apply to you because you've met the conditions for all of your distributions to be quote unquote qualified. So anything you take out, tax and penalty free from this point forward, period. All right, so what if it's not a qualified distribution? Now we start looking at this. Well, is there an exception to the 10% early withdrawal penalty? Those are those 10 or 12 things we just looked at. If there is an exception to the penalty, then this will say whether or not your withdrawal is subject to tax. And as we discussed, yes, your earnings withdrawal will still be subject to tax, but the 10% penalty is gone in all cases. Okay. And finally, if it's a non-qualified distribution and there is no penalty exception, well, here's where tax or penalty may apply. Earnings, double doozy, taxed and penalized if you take them out. Non-taxable conversions, no tax, no penalty. Contributions, like I said before, contributions are always tax and penalty free when you take them out. Doesn't matter when, how long they've been there, what the reason is, always tax and penalty free. It's conversions you got to look out for. It's earnings you have to look out for. All right, I'll leave it here. I'd say this is self-explanatory, but it's not. It's funny when the footnotes are twice the size as the main table, but I don't think there's any way around that. So this summarizes it as best as possible. I'll post this up to the group. And one more thing I want to show is the beloved Form 8606. We talk about this a lot in the group when you do Roth conversions, when you do non-deductible contributions to a traditional IRA, when you do Roth distributions, you will have to use Form 8606, attach it to your tax return in the year of the activity. So let's just look. I'll skip the rest of this because this is a big rabbit hole we can get sucked into. But this part 3, distributions from Roth IRAs. Any year you take money out of your Roth IRA, you need to look at this 8606 and basically fill it in, as relevant to you. So, for example, if you take out qualified distributions, then you in effect don't need this form because it starts with enter your total non-qualified distributions from Roth IRAs. So it already presupposes if it's qualified, there's no tax, no penalty, blah, so you don't have to put anything here. But if it's non-qualified, again, you're younger than 59 and a half or whatever, then you got to start filling this out. And I won't go through all of it in detail because we'll be here for a half hour just looking at this small font. The takeaway here is that this will step you through, okay, it's non-qualified, well, do one of the exceptions apply, like first-time home buyer or things like that. This is also what will be used to parse through, okay, so you've already exhausted taking out all of your contributions. Now you're dipping into conversions. So now you got to start looking at your conversions, how much was taxed and et cetera. And you do need to often look at this form in conjunction with publication, where is it? 590B, I think so, yeah. It says see instructions. So if you read the instructions to this form, it'll refer you to 590B. Anyway, so tax returns are very circular and there's a lot of stuff going on. They're not as clean and pretty as they may look on the surface sometimes. But I just wanted to bring this up. I'm not going to, again, go through this in more detail, but 8606 is a big one anytime you got any Roth activity or non-deductible contributions to IRAs. Okay. I'm done with what I wanted to discuss, so let me get rid of the screen share. Let me get some drink. Question time. Now, here's my other, I'm not sure what to do with questions because I can see there's a lot of them. Oh boy. Now, the issue is with the streaming software I'm using, I can't see when someone replies to another comment. I only see just comment. So what I've been doing in the past is like stumbling through these. I'll look at someone's question at the top of the list, not realizing that 12 entries down, someone else already responded to that person. So got to figure out a better way to curate and address questions going forward. For what it's worth, when I do the mailbag one, I'm going to ask that nobody comment on other people's questions. Let the comments be only questions, so there won't be other cluttered stuff in this list that I see here. But for tonight, whatever, I can see other folks have already, responded, replied, and answered other questions. So I'm not sure the best way to do this. Let me maybe start at the bottom and just kind of scroll up from there, because usually when I go from the top down, I miss that people have already responded to others. So, all right, starting at the bottomest question. Okay, that's a comment, not a question. Never mind. Anyone have any luck getting copies of Form 8606s from 20 plus years ago? Ugh. And if they're not filed with your returns, you can recreate them. I've heard, people who haven't done them year to year to year, just like picking up and starting fresh 1 year going forward. Excuse me. They'll just, basically true up anything that should have been carrying over year to year to year and just plop it in for that year going forward. Then make sure going forward they're keeping up with your 8606s. And I'm not saying that's right. That's not advice to say to do that, but I've heard people saying you can just pick up and start going forward with 8606s if you've forgotten to do them in the past. Okay. Just looking at what else we got here. Not in early distribution, Cody. Let's see what this is all about. Paula, is there a separate 5-year waiting period for the earnings on each Roth conversion? ? Assuming age over 59 and a half. No, there's not. Great question. So if your first Roth, so you're over 59 and a half, good. That's one of two conditions for all of your withdrawals to be qualified. The other one is your first Roth IRA that you opened and funded at least 5 years old? If the answer is yes, then all of your distributions going forward are qualified, period. No tax, no penalty. That simple. If your first Roth IRA, Paula, is not yet 5 full years old, starting with January 1st of the year you opened and funded your first Roth IRA, then you will have to wait until that 5-year period passes before you can take out earnings tax-free. That includes earnings on conversions, Paula. So there'll be no 10% penalty because you're over 59 and a half, but you will still owe tax on any earnings until your first account is at least 5 years old. Paula, great question. Let's see. I have a 401k Roth. I'm 62. When I retire, I want to transfer the funds in my 401k Roth to a Roth IRA. Do I have to wait 5 years to withdraw my earnings? Depends. How old, whoever this and this is a rhetorical question, I'm not expecting a reply, but how old is your first Roth IRA poster? If you do not yet have one and you're opening your Roth upon the rolling over of your 401k, then your 5-year clock starts fresh in that year. Here's one of the drawbacks of rolling over a Roth 401k if you don't already have a Roth IRA. So even if your Roth 401k is 15 years old, you will have met the 5-year clock within your Roth IRA and you're over 59 and a half. So if and when you take money out of your Roth 401k, all those distributions are qualified from that Roth 401k, again, because the account's 15 years old and you're over 59 and a half. Once you roll your Roth 401k into a Roth IRA, whatever clock you did or didn't meet in your 401k doesn't matter. At that point, it takes over or it assumes the clock of your Roth IRAs. So if your first Roth IRA was open and funded at least 5 years ago, you're good because it's over 5 years old. But if it's not, and you're opening the Roth IRA for the first time upon the rollover, well, guess what? Your 5-year clock just started. You're over 59 and a half, which is good. So that means there will be no 10% penalty, but taking out earnings will be taxable until the 5 years has passed. Now, your contributions you made to your Roth, their classification as contributions stays. So let's assume you had 80 grand in contributions and 20 grand in gains in your Roth 401k. You roll that 100 grand over. You can take out up to 80 grand of it anytime, no tax or penalty, because that's just you taking out your original contributions. It's the 20,000 of gains where you're going to need to wait the 5 years if your Roth isn't already 5 years old to take out that earnings without tax. Person, whoever this was. Great question. All right, going back again. If you're doing traditional to Roth conversions over subsequent years into the same account, how do you track each year's conversions/gains to know how much you can withdraw in year 6? First year, the first conversion can be withdrawn. I don't know. It's a great question. Spreadsheet, honestly. I mean, I've been doing conversions for a while. I just have it on a spreadsheet, honestly. There might be better ways. I don't think 8606 8606 doesn't do the math for you. It still makes you rely on yourself to account for how many have met this 5-year period. Now, maybe somewhere in the instructions to 8606, there may be like a table that they give you that you can fill out yourself. But ultimately, that's just going to be like you doing your own spreadsheet or keeping a list or something like that. I don't know of a better way than that. There may be one. If anyone knows, definitely share. But I'm not personally aware of something. What now? Again, that only matters if you're under 59 and a half and your first Roth IRA isn't at least 5 years old. If it is, once it is, it doesn't matter. All these windows, just throw them out. Because from that point forward, again, every dollar you take out, tax and penalty free, period. It's only prior to that you actually need to worry about this tracing and tracking to pay attention to the various different 5-year clocks on all your conversions. I thought you need earned income to open a Roth IRA. Sort of. Anyone can open a Roth IRA. Well, you need to be legal age and I guess a citizen or at least a resident or whatever. There are checks, but the point is you don't need earned income. Like anyone practically can open a Roth IRA. It's being able to put money in it is where you might need earned income. Now, to make a direct contribution, yes, you need earned income in that year, but anybody can convert. So let's assume you have a traditional IRA you funded over the course of however many years. You stop working 2 years ago, so you have no earned income at this point. You can no longer directly contribute to your Roth assume you don't have a spouse because that's a different wrinkle, but you can no longer contribute to your Roth, but you can convert. You can convert money in. You don't need earned income to do conversions. For purposes of the 5-year clock of when you opened and fund your first Roth IRA, converting money in counts just the same. The point is getting money into your Roth is what starts the clock. Doesn't need to just be a conversion. Doesn't need to just be a contribution, can be a conversion. So yes and no. Anyone could open it. You need earned income to contribute. You don't need earned income to convert. Good question. All right. Just seeing what else we got here. Let's see what this is all about. Can my husband convert any of his IRA to my Roth? I'll stop right there. No. As he doesn't have a Roth. We are both retired and over 59 and a half, so I don't think he can start a Roth. Wrong, thankfully. So the I in IRA stands for individual, whether it's traditional IRA or Roth IRA, the I stands for individual. So your IRA and your Roth IRA are yours. While you're both alive, spouses cannot commingle, convert in, convert out, whatever, across each other's IRAs or Roth IRAs. When one spouse dies, that's a different story. Then the surviving spouse can take the deceased spouse's accounts and mush them into their own. But while you're both alive, going back to before that previous question, perfectly planted. So your husband does not yet have his own Roth IRA. He can still open one, even though he no longer has earnings. So he can open his own. He can do conversions from his IRA into his new Roth IRA if he wants to. But he cannot convert his IRA into your Roth IRA. Make sense? But yes, he can start his own Roth at this point. He just can't directly contribute if he has no more earned income, unless you do. That's a different story. But he can always convert at any age, regardless of income or lack thereof. All right. Here we go. My Roth includes both contributions and conversions. Over 5 years old, over 59 and a half. Is that a problem? So just to confirm, when you say over 5 years old, you mean your first Roth IRA account was opened and funded at least 5 years ago? And you're over 59 and a half? No, not a problem at all. Quite the opposite. You hit the golden ticket, you're done the rest of your life. Every single dollar you take out of your Roth IRAs will be tax and penalty free. Doesn't matter how it got in there or when at this point, because you're quote unquote qualified distributions. So you're good. You hit the goal everyone wants to get to with Roth IRAs, 59 and a half. And your first Roth IRA is at least 5 full years old, starting with January 1st of the year you opened and funded it. Great question. Let's see what this is. What do we got here? If I understand this correctly, the simple scenario is to open and fund. Yeah. Right. Fund is important. A Roth IRA when I'm 54 to 55 and then not take any distributions until 59 and a half. If I can do that, I can avoid all these complex rules. Yes, exactly. This is not advice. I don't give advice, but open an IRA, a Roth IRA sooner rather than later, for no other reason than to get the 5-year clock started for all of you that don't already have. And yes, this is my daughter's Monsters Inc. mug. Again, 59 and a half, you can't speed that up. That's just time. But the 5-year thing, you can control. If you don't already have a Roth IRA, get one open. Whether you contribute legally, meaning you have earned income and you're below the phase out income levels, whatever, whether you contribute or convert something in, get a Roth IRA going if you don't have one already. There's no minimum. As long, you can, in theory, get 1 cent in there. Now, practically speaking, the custodian you open it may have some minimum, $100 or whatever. I don't know, but it's not going to be thousands of dollars. Just get something in it, the smallest amount possible. If that's all you're willing and able to do, whatever. But get one started sooner rather than later. Again, that's not advice, just saying. Yeah. The answer to your question, but yes, exactly. Just start one sooner rather than later. There's no harm in that, assuming you contribute properly or do a conversion. Good question. What is the extent of the documentation does one need to keep for Roths? So few things. If you do conversions, few ways to go about it. Spreadsheet, the 8606, every year you do conversions, you have to do an 8606. Assuming you do, and you keep all those, whether it's electronic or paper copies or whatever, that will be your records. Now, it's not one simple, pretty table, but nonetheless, every year of conversions should have an 8606. So keep track of it that way. You'll also get the end of year tax documents from your custodians. Anytime money comes into an IRA or Roth IRA, you'll get a form 5498 at the end of the tax year. You'll have those you can keep for your records. Anytime money's come out, like conversion, for example, you'll get a 1099-R from the account the money came out of. You can keep that. So you can keep all this stuff to help corroborate if and when needed, or at least help you remember down the road what to do. Now, going back to that other question that I just answered, if you're over 59 and a half and your first Roth IRA is at least 5 years old, you don't have to worry about any of this nonsense, because from that point forward, every penny you take out is tax and penalty free, period. So that's one way around it, is just wait 5 years and until you're 59 and a half, and then you're set. You don't have to worry about this. All right. Okay. Roth is tax-free for federal only, not state and local, right? I think someone may have commented on this. So yeah, federal, yes. Roth distributions are tax-free, assuming they're qualified. Again, if they're not qualified, you may owe tax at least, maybe a 10% penalty as well. As far as state and local, I'd be surprised if any states tax Roth distributions. I don't know of any that do. That's not to say there aren't any. Again, there's 50 states, most of which have income tax. As far as local jurisdictions, that's even more. I don't think any do. I'd be surprised if they do, but don't know with certainty. Yeah, good question. I think I finally understand the 2 5-year clocks related to conversions. Yes, awesome. Hopefully the light went off. They are tricky, and I see people butcher the 5-year rules all the time because they sort of conflate one with the other. And depending what blog you go on, it may not be written by a reputable source, so that just further confuses things. I have seen reputable blogs and articles that have gotten this wrong as well, unfortunately. So it's tough to get clear answers, and you can see why, because of all these ifs and that's and this and conditions and exceptions to exceptions. Yeah, it's not easy. All right, let me I'm just seeing if there's any other questions here up the top. If not, I'll scroll back to the bottom. Dave Fultz, here's a good one. Why are Roth conversions allowed to be so much larger than Roth IRA contribution limits? Yeah, it's a good one. I don't have a great answer. I mean, the government likes when you do conversions because it's tax. Like, they like getting taxed sooner rather than later. So sure, they'll let you convert as much as you want now. As far as why they don't let you contribute, I don't know. I mean, frankly, I think they should just do away with income limits on contributions. It's only $6,000 or $7,000 a year we're talking about. It's not really going to make or break anyone. I'd really like to see them get rid of the income-based limits around being able to do contributions, because I just don't get it. I'm sure there's some reason for it, but it doesn't seem that worth it or logical to me. But yeah, conversions government likes because it's tax money in their pocket in the year you do it. All right. Okay. Let me. Here's a question I sort of touched on before. Does the clock start when the Roth was opened with the employer? So no, if it's a Roth 401k or Roth 403b, for example, yes, the clock of that plan starts when you opened it. Once you roll it out, that clock gets thrown out. Doesn't matter whether you met the 5 years or not. The clock now of the money you roll out from your employer plan to your Roth IRA, that clock now looks to your Roth IRA. If your Roth IRA was already open 5 years, great, your clock's met. If it wasn't, then you just lost any credit towards the 5-year clock that you had when the money was in your employer plan, because again, now it looks to the clock of the Roth IRA. So this could help you, this could hurt you. It all depends, your circumstances and how old your Roth IRA is. Okay. Oh, this was a good one. So it showed the 5-year clock starts in January. If I contribute for the first time before April 15th, 2021 for 2020 tax year, when does the 5-year rule start? January 2020 or 2021? That's a good one. 90% confident it will be 2020. 95. Yeah, I'm almost certain now. I looked this up a few weeks ago. I sort of forgot it, but very close to positive that it's the year that the contribution was for, not the calendar year you actually did it. So in this example, your clock would start January 1st, 2020, even though you didn't actually put the money in until February or March of 2021. Great question. All right. Okay, let me see. Yeah, this one I touched on too. So TSP, that's the Federal Thrift Savings Plan. It's the 401k, if you will, of the federal employees. Just like I mentioned before, even if your Roth TSP is over 5 years old, doesn't matter. Once you roll it, it's the clock of your IRAs, your Roth IRAs that matter at that point. So maybe that helps you, maybe it hurts you. It depends how old your Roth IRAs are. Okay. All right, let me go down to the bottom now. Those are all the top questions. Got that one. How does the IRS know my Roth clock started? That's a good one. So the onus is ultimately on you to be truthful and honest with your record keeping and whatever. But the IRS has this information of when you first contributed. Now, I don't know how slick their systems and computers and processes are to back into it. I would assume it's pretty simple to do. But like I mentioned before, anytime money goes into your IRA or Roth IRA, you'll get a form 5498 at the end of the tax year. The IRS also gets copies of those 5498 forms. Like the IRS gets copies of your W-2s, your 1099s, your Social Security, your these 5498s. So the IRS, again, if they're slick enough to figure this out, they will be able to find out when was your first 5498 showing money going into a Roth IRA. That's how they'll know. If they choose to do the homework or if their computer does it, I don't know if they do or not. In reality, what happens is when you first take a distribution from your Roth IRA and you're filling out that form 8606, it'll ask you, did you take any distributions which were not qualified? So that implies it's on you to know whether or not it was qualified. And if your account was 5 years old and you're 59 and a half, it's qualified. So, you did the work. Now, if you lie, if you're 43 like I am and you just open an IRA this year and you take out earnings this year, that's not qualified. Assuming I'm honest, I will report that on my 8606. What if I'm not honest? What if I report that as qualified? Will the IRS catch me? They can. Will they? I don't know. Again, I haven't seen this happen, but they definitely have the info to figure it out themselves. I don't know how good they are at matching, if they do it randomly or if it's this automatic computer screening process that'll catch you like that. I don't know. But, I wouldn't advocate lying about it. I'm not saying you would, but they ultimately can know. So don't assume they can't. Anyway, but yeah, it's ultimately on you to figure out if that's where you're going. Okay. Ooh, yes. Hey, Mavis. Hi, Mavis. Can you remind us what we need to do to get our name to appear with our comments? Yes, I will send a post after this. There's a special opt-in you have to do. So the streaming service I use is third party. It's not Facebook. For Facebook privacy reasons, they by default don't let people's names and pictures flow into the streaming software unless you opt into allowing Facebook to share your name and pictures. I will send you a link. There's this thing you got to fill out. And then going forward, your name and picture will show up. All right. What else do we got? What if you had a Roth and took all the funds out? Do you start a new 5-year rule if you do a conversion? That's a good. I looked this up at one point. I don't remember the answer. I don't think it starts over. So example would be 20 years ago, you started a Roth IRA. You had the money in there for 6 years, let's say, and you stopped. You took the money out. Well, you would have had to pay tax and penalty, whatever. So yeah, you took the money out. The account was 6 years old. You're still in your 40s, whatever. You do a conversion now, or let's say you hit 59 and a half. Did your 5-year clock, is it already met because you had an IRA, or did it start over because you emptied your account? I don't think it starts over. I don't know this with certainty. I looked it up. I forgot the answer. I think even if you subsequently take the money out of your Roth, the 5-year clock is still good. Now that begs the question, what if you put money in 10 years ago, you take it out the next day and leave it empty for 20 years? Does it count? Did the 5-year clock start on that one day you had the money in? That's making me question my answer, because I don't know. That feels too gamey to say that would work, but maybe it would. I don't know. I'd have to look that up. Good question though. All right. I see people ask about the spousal one. There's a lot of back and forth about that, so I won't comment on spousal IRAs. Okay. And let's just see. I guess we got one more question here, perhaps. Okay. What's this? Here's the informational file. Oh, yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks. That's about the 5498. All right. Looks like we are done then. I don't see any other comments or questions other than please post a link for the opt-in. I will do that after. I was hesitant to do it because when I started using this software in January, I did post it, and within seconds, the first response was something like, "I don't trust this. I don't like what this is doing to my privacy," something along those lines. So I was like, "Oh, okay, let me take that down." But I will post it up for those of you that want to opt in, because I think the person interpreted it as like I was trying to get information about people, but that was far from the case. It was just simply, to see names and faces. But I do appreciate people's concerns for privacy, so I didn't push the issue after that. But I will post a link to how to opt in to having your name and picture shown, like David Fultz here. Where'd it go? David Fultz has opted in. Okay, we will wrap it there. Thank you, Mavis. I appreciate it. I will see you next week. Next week's topic is when to start Social Security. That one will be juicy, to say the least. And the week after that will be the first free-for-all mailbag. I might drink through that one just to make it more fun, because I don't know how that's going to turn out. All right, that's it. I will see you next week. I will post up the Roth summary thing that I referenced, and I will also post up the process to opt in to show your name and picture here. All right, take care. See you later.